comparison. Samuel's demo. Samuel will give a demo or will walk us through what do I describe?
Wait, what the fuck am I seeing here?
Call it a thing he built for now.
Better. Okay. Oh, I need to go live. Fuck.
Can you share the YouTube link again, Marcelo? It was on the. I've lost it. I think it was on the old.
Hold on, am I live? I think we're live.
Well, if we are, welcome everybody. Marcelo, can you share that YouTube link just so I can check what's going on?
Hold on. I don't know how to get the YouTube link. Hold on. Got it. So I need to send it to you here, right? Here, let's see. Hold on. Let me actually go to that link as well.
Marcelo, can you share that YouTube?
Okay, I think we're good. Are we? Oh,
what's the link so I can go
full
see
screen,
chats
yeah.
and such?
Sorry, folks. Welcome to how do you call this? Modern talk show AI? Is it? Yeah, something like that, right? Welcome, folks. We're here with Samuel and David, our CEO and our CTO, and we'll be talking about Pydantic AI and related topics.
Welcome everybody. Yep. Looking forward to it. David, whereabouts are we starting?
Well, I think I wanted to start. I mean, especially if we wait a little bit for anyone who's interested to join. I think we could just go through sort of short-term priorities on Pydantic AI, sorts of things each of you guys are thinking about or working on. I mean, I can start on evals. So we released Pydantic evals, I think, about a week and a half ago. And the point is,
David, what are evals?
What are evals? So the point is, if you want to evaluate your model, your agent's performance in the sense of like, it's very abstract. Is it doing what you want it to do? You might try to add, check that the tokens aren't going over some limit, or that the response contains some data, or that it's sufficiently fast, or any variety of things you want to check on it. Essentially, think of it like unit tests for your agent behavior. Or maybe you want to set like a minimum threshold of some score or something.
David, this is too abstract for me. Can you show me a bit?
No.
No.
I just mentioned the point. If you're not familiar with evals, I'm not going to get into it. If you are, I'm making some improvements to the LLM judge to be able to use fewer tokens and things like this. That's sort of one of my priorities. I will do a better job of writing docs for evals in the coming week.
Who in the chat is familiar about our Pydantic evals package? But you can continue. I'm just going to check.
Well, I would say that's my main. And then obviously we just released Pydantic AI 0.1.0 yesterday. We're gonna use minor version bumps to signify breaking changes. So if you don't basically when we merge things that aren't breaking changes, we're not going to bump the patch or the minor version, so you can kind of tell a little more easily. And there's a few regressions reported that we're going to release probably at the end of this call. I think it's ready to release now, but
yeah. So just concretely, we have a new we call it upgrade guide. But we have the full change log basically ripped off GitHub, and then some summary of effectively things you might genuinely be interested in. So the two breaking changes or kind of breaking changes in 0.1 were when I very first started Pydantic AI, I used the word result, not output, which was a mistake on my part. And we should have fixed it some time ago, but we've now fixed it. And it means that like but we also had like response and result, and the difference was somewhat complex. And so now the thing you get back from a run is a result, which has many different attributes, including output, which is the thing the model returned, and then format as XML function, which is very useful. was previously in a module called format as XML, which made it weird to import. I've moved that now, so you can do from Pydantic AI import format as XML.
Why is it useful?
So, I mean, people discuss this stuff at great length, but everyone's understanding is that LLMs are very good at understanding code that is formatted as XML-ish.
Code, you mean data?
Yeah, data. So if you're sending, for example, a bunch of like data about customers, I don't know why that's decided not to load. Our website is not normally this slow, so I think my internet might be having a wobble. But if you're sending a data about, say, companies, and you have company name, company email address, date founded, you send that data as JSON, it's much harder for an LLM to work out where the bounds of each field are. And also to terminate the XML, terminate the escape the JSON strings. Whereas if you send that through with like XML tags, LLMs are very good at understanding it. So format as XML gives you a really nice, quick way to effectively turn virtually any object into XML. And I don't know why it's
like serialize it as XML. Yeah, there's not that much on that page, I think, but.
It's also saying the input is XML, which is a string, which is not. It can be anything. So that sounds like a mistake on my part. But that's the old method, and then we should have a new one, which I have not added to the API documentation. I realize as I'm going through it, which is my mistake. So I will go and fix that soon.
Yeah, I think anyway, that makes sense. I think the important things I want to mention in 0.1, I think the biggest one is that we added instructions, and I think there's a little there was a bug with it that we're going to fix in 0.1.1 where it wasn't, the instructions weren't reused after tool calls. So that's a pretty serious bug, but it will be fixed in the next hour. The important thing to know is that basically all usage of system prompt should be changed out for instructions. In particular, if you have any intention of sharing history or reusing history with different agents, system prompt, the way system prompt works is that it doesn't, at least on pre 0.1.0 versions, it would not swap out, automatically change out the system prompt when you switch agents. It would just use the original system prompt, which was probably a misdesign at best. And there's some other sort of tweaks we wanted to make there, may have been made already, but the point is instructions is the way forward. I think that other agent frameworks are using that as the term now. So I think we're partially being consistent with that and partially having the behavior, like different behavior that I think a lot of people have been asking for a long time, of like, just only include the system prompt from my current agent. And if you use instructions everywhere in all of your agents, that will happen automatically when you pass the message history between them.
But we've left system prompt around with its old behavior, so that shouldn't be a breaking change. But it
won't break. We may change that in the future, but it basically strongly encourage you to move everything from system prompt to instructions, so that it behaves the way that you want.
I have two people already interested about Google's A2A specification on the chat.
Why don't we just start talking about that? Do you want to, Marcelo?
I don't know how much.
You're the expert.
Well, I read the spec. Well, most than. Anyway, so the specification explains how you should communicate between agents. It kind of exposes a way to for you to expose your agent to other agents or to users, and it defines authentication, and that's what I complete what I said.
Well, I think Marcelo, I don't know. I mean, it may be almost worth showing some of the work in progress on the fast A2A thing.
All right,
because you can at least show it might. I mean, should I? If you tell me a branch, I can screen share it and you can tell me where to go.
I can push the branch and then I can do that.
But the point is, we were looking at it earlier together, and the point is, I think you can see the different, even just looking at the types that you've defined as part of the protocol compliance, Marcelo, it's pretty useful. You can see that you send task. The point is, as part of the protocol, you receive task requests, and send responses. While you're pulling that up, or while you're getting that in place, can we talk a little bit about the difference between MCP and A2A? I know that's like been a common point of confusion.
Hold on, I don't know how to open without
Okay,
like to open that. I need to close this for a bit. That's what needs to happen. Shall we?
okay,
Which means everything's going to get screwed up.
let's not do that because I was looking on the live stream and you were switching.
Yeah.
I think the other thing
we can share after this.
We have there's MCP, which is obviously the OG ancient protocol from December. Then we have agency from Cisco and our friends at LangChain and a few others, which is an open source collaboration for inter-agent communication, and then A2A, which is the same thing. So the conceptual difference is that MCP was designed to be a solution for things like Cursor, Claude Desktop, obviously Windsurf Z, etc. But it's
basically tools. It's like a standard for tools.
That will upset David.
Well, that's what everyone uses it. That's what everyone uses it for.
Right. It obviously also has resources and system prompts, but like it is designed to be used from desktop applications. Whereas, as I understand it, agency, that's agency without the E, is the spelling, agency.org.
And with a T, agntcy.org.
Like that. If you want to just, I'll share my screen and do it that way.
Sorry, folks. I clicked the wrong button here. Sorry.
So agency like this is from Cisco in particular, but also a bunch of other companies involved. This standard for open collaboration. I've had one call with them already, and we're having another call to talk to them about that. Obviously, MCP, as I said, is the oldest of these. It's probably not the best article. Probably best to start here. This is the spec. This is by far the most widely used of these protocols. I'm personally very bullish on MCP. I think it can be extended to do the same stuff that A2A and agency are doing, but I may be wrong. And then we have A2A from Google et al.
Can you open the A2A spec? I mean, I can make some comments that I've seen about the spec.
Do you know?
A2A specification should be no. But
Google.
GitHub and
there it is down below. It's at the bottom of your page now.
Yeah.
Open this.
Yeah, you can open
this. So yeah, maybe like you could, wherever you'd like me to go, Marcelo.
I mean, so what I'm developing right now, I can share a bit. It's a way to expose a PydanticAI agent as a server. So that's the idea. One thing that I noticed on the spec is that an agent can have many skills, which I'm not sure if that's the idea. And I think we talked
to be clear.
Before. Yeah.
Marcelo, when you say expose an agent as a server, you mean as a server that is compliant with the A2A spec.
Right.
Like the point is you can send requests like the idea of A2A is that you have a server that meets some spec that is basically a wrapper around an agent. And so and so the point is like you're writing a way to do that very conveniently as an developer.
Correct. The idea is to expose that server as like agent.toServer or A2A server, and then you already have the server. So the thing that I found it a bit weird on this spec, well, there are a couple of things, but this one, it's that an agent can have multiple skills, which we discussed a bit internally, but that's a weird concept because supposedly based on other definitions of agent, an agent is capable of doing
one thing,
right? So that's one point of the spec defines that the agent card has the agent itself can have many skills.
Well, to be fair to them, one is interesting that even in their first diagram they're talking about MCP. So I know that there's it sounds like they're at least trying to be not a direct competitor to MCP.
Well, they have a page about it, right? You can literally see it on the left. If you go straight to the left, A2A and MCP down right there. Yeah. And they say use MCP for tools and A2A for agents.
Okay, we will.
I mean, I know you kind of have a different opinion there.
I think most things are either basically transferring control to another agent, in which case I don't know how this quite applies, or it's calling a tool. The only thing that A2A has a concept of that isn't, as far as I know, explicitly defined in the MCP spec is like I forget the word, Marcelo, but basically kick off a job and let it go. But like,
Well, it's
Yeah,
interesting. I mean,
it's
they used to. I think they've updated this page actually because I saw that it used to say A2A Heart MCP and other things like that. Oh no, it does say that at the top. We recommend MCP for tools and A2A for agents. If you scroll back down to where you were, it's interesting. They're saying to expose A2A things as MCP resources.
um,
oh yeah,
I think the other thing they're saying here on this page is interesting. Like, in answer to your multiple skills, they are showing multiple
agents.
agent emojis here. So maybe they think that like each skill is an agent.
Right, that makes sense, kind of. But then,
Right. Each skill would be like a
why do you
Pydantic
call it?
AI agent.
Right, but then the naming of stuff gets a bit weird, right? Because you have the agent card, which is defines a set of skills, and then you have a name, so it's a name that you group agents. I guess that's the idea.
I think
Uh,
the problem is that it's the same problem that everyone's had in this space, which is that like the word agent conceptually refers to something that can do a lot of stuff. And the industry has converged on this like sort of term of art meaning of agent to mean like a very narrow thing.
right,
We actually were, I think, one of the first movers in that way. We called it agent a fairly like our Pydantic AI agent is a fairly narrow thing, and then OpenAI, when they released their agents SDK, and I think Ed Propic gave some talks about this where they basically both used agent in the same way.
right.
Um, I know our
They
agents
have it on
SDK
this
predated
page,
the OpenAI one.
but there's a good talk from them where they're basically saying, I don't know, they have the like definition of somewhere. There's basically an agent is
An
just
agent is
run
like a
the
loop of yeah.
Share the link on the YouTube chat.
this one or the other ones.
Whatever you find interesting, just to help people.
This one is overshared. I don't think it's as
I
someone.
just share it anyway.
Yeah,
Just paste it in.
socialize, man. Anyway, I have some questions already. So hold on. So isn't A2A communication called handover in agent framework? Handover? Is it
Handoff.
handoff?
Yeah,
Handoff.
Yeah.
yeah.
uh,
And actually, we do have.
Handoff is kind of different. Like, I mean, I think the critical thing with A2A is that it's, completely separate servers, etc. Like handoffs are usually in the same process.
yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, I
in other
understand that.
agent
I mean,
frameworks.
it can be on a different process anyway.
Yeah,
But
conceptually, yes. I mean, it's sort of like
I don't think the
you're handing
question
off
is
from one
that.
agent to another.
Yeah, but I
I
mean, the
don't. No, no,
question
no. I
also
don't
is.
think it's a crazy question.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like, usually when you think about like OpenAI's agent framework has handoff as a thing,
yeah,
Yep.
like,
but I mean,
but that is referring to something narrower.
But
can't you supposedly can't you do the handoff using A2A servers? You can,
yeah,
right? You
I
can
agree
just
with the
pass
question.
one to other.
As
Yeah.
opposed to tools where you're basically delegating control, go off and do something, but then give me back control once you're done to continue the task.
Right.
Um,
You're gonna
anyway,
Well, to be fair, there's the whole like output tool thing where it's essentially like don't return control to me, but like
but
they're
that's a like
closely related.
alternative use of tools. Should we? Any other questions on?
Uh,
I'll stop sharing
I,
on A2A agency or MCP.
I have. Would it be the same as MCP server having multiple tools?
No, because this is as the previous question indicated. This is more about handoff. Look, in my experience, for all that their diagram shows two things that are servers communicating, in my experience, for the vast majority, I'll just paste that link as well, which I think is useful into the chat. In the end, everything's the client, all of such communications end up with a client and a server. And so I still don't really understand why this required a separate protocol, why this couldn't have been done within MCP. But I may be wrong.
Well, it probably could. I think there's different motivate. Like the point is, they don't want to have to fight a war in order to convince MCP to change. They just are going to introduce things that work the way they want, and if things end up converging, then I guess they probably don't care too much. I think the interesting point is like with A2A, right? Like with MCP, I'm not handing control to a different agent. Like my agent can make use of MCP tools, but you're going to give me control's going to end up back in my agent. Now you could build an application that like has MCP tools and has some agents and like plumbs it all through and does handoffs between your agents, fine. But I think the A2A protocol is more oriented around like this agent has access to some tools, and then I'm going to go from like, you know, agent 1 to agent 2, which has like maybe different tools and is maybe running in a completely different place. And like there's no sharing of MCP servers from agent 1 to agent 2. And so essentially like A2A is part of a system architecture that where the agents are like actually components of it, whereas MCP is like kind of like tied to an individual agent, I think, under that conceptual model.
Yeah, I think the other thing to say is MCP, understandably, given where it came from, assumes that tools that you will keep an internet connection open during a tool run. Whereas if you had a tool that took 6 days to run, you wouldn't really want to be like hoping that you had the same HTTP connection open. Maybe they don't have to be because you're returning over a separate thread. But like anyway, to say on Pydantic AI, we obviously already have MCP support as a client. We have examples of Pydantic AI being used with an MCP server. We need to do sampling, both support sampling when Pydantic AI is acting as a client and connected to servers, and also we need to basically have a provider, which is like use MCP sampling, where when the model when Pydantic AI calls a model, it's actually using MCP to basically ask the client to use its model. Those need to be done, but we already have some support. On A2A, Marcelo is working on it now. Agency, we've got a call coming up, so I think we will try our best to support all three, or at least have examples of usage with all three. Go on, David.
I was going to say, I mean, for anyone who didn't follow the sampling thing, like sampling is a feature in MCP that is not very popular yet, but it allows basically to delegate an LLM request to the user instead of doing it on the so essentially it's a way to get better sort of transparency for the user into what like requests are being made and what data is being included, etc.
Well, not so much the user's model. So the point is, if you're running Cursor locally, Cursor connects to Google Drive or an MCP server that connects to Google Drive. It needs to, who knows, analyze a file to extract whether or not whatever. Instead of that server having to make its direct connection to Claude or OpenAI or whatever, it's going to basically use sampling to call back to the client's Cursor and say, please, can I use your model, whatever that is, to do the cost. So we have a really neat example. We are building, or David Hewitt on our team is building MCP-DB, which is a database for agents which can do both traditional key value stuff, filtering, and embedding search. But it operates as an MCP server, so it basically exposes a bunch of tools. One of the things we would like to be able to do when you give us a text value is turn that into an embedding to store in the database. We don't want to have to basically use our own credits to OpenAI or Anthropic to generate those embeddings. So we're hoping to use sampling to go back to the client and say, do this sampling. Now, turns out MCP doesn't yet support embeddings generation via sampling, so we'll have to wait for that to be fully supported or have but I mean, you can basically set a bunch of attributes when you do sampling saying whatever you like. So we'll be able to get it to work with Pydantic AI, but that's an example of it working. Anything else on these protocols, Marcelo?
No, we're good. We're good. We can.
Shall I talk about politics?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
You should probably introduce your app. I don't think we have given much context.
So for once, we're not talking about American politics, which I think, whatever we think about it, was probably everyone is a bit relieved about. But there's a very popular politics podcast called The Rest is Politics that I listened to. We listened to it last week, and they got into a somewhat heated argument about whether or not lots of MPs, members of parliament, are the children of politicians. And sure enough, if you look at, and in particular, it seems relevant to the Labour Party, who make lots of noise about being very working class and having no one from private school in their cabinet. but actually, if you go and look at them, loads of them are the children of union leaders or MPs or councillors. And so I thought this was actually quite an interesting use of Pydantic AI. So the original, oops, sorry, I've messed up. The original idea was I was going to use MCP and the Playwright's excellent browser MCP. So it's basically exposing a browser via an MCP server. It turns out, and this I think is a quite interesting example of where those sorts of cases break down. The first thing you need to do if you want to get information about all MPs is to load this page here and basically extract what the like, naivest approach would be like, okay, I've got a list of all of the MPs in the UK. Let me just throw all of this content at the LLM and it will extract details or the URLs of all the MPs. If you try and do that, it throws you an error and says that this page in total is more than 200 kilobytes or 200, whatever it is, 200,000 characters. And so it can't load it. So the first thing you discover is that the like very basic approach of just like give an MCP, give an AI a browser and tell it to go to this page doesn't work. In this case, we get a bit lucky in that Wikipedia returns HTML. Obviously, lots of modern sites don't return HTML. They return basically, for example, LinkedIn, if you load it via like HTTPX or a plain browser, it returns basically a stub saying load this JavaScript and start loading our big React app or whatever it is. Luckily, Wikipedia does return HTML. So what we can do is we can go with HTMX and download the HTML, pass that to Beautiful Soup, which is an amazing library, been around for many years, presumably is now having a kind of renaissance with all of the Gen AI usage. And we basically, I wrote some code manually. I think you could probably get an AI to do this if you were using something like our Run Python tool, but like basically using this to extract a list of the MPs. And then the idea that from there on, so to be clear, that first bit has got 0 Pydantic AI involved. But once we've got this list of all the MPs, then this is the interesting bit. We have a very simple agent. To be fair, this is not a truly agentic workflow. We're just using it we're basically using it just to call an LLM. We have our definition of a political relation, which is here. So we have a Pydantic model. We're use attribute doc strings. So these doc strings become the descriptions of each of the fields, and we have the name of the relation, their role, as in, and then we have what their political role was. In particular, we have a literal of what relation they are to the politician, and maybe it's interesting what party they were in. This is an interesting example of AI. I tried to prompt it and said, don't include spouses or siblings, because I don't think they're particularly relevant to the original question. And it basically, like, none of the models could I get to reliably ignore husband, wife, brother, or sister. So what I did was change it to include all of them, and then basically ignored relations when processing the code that weren't that were like same generation. So it was like much easier to basically say, yep, give me the data you think is most what the model's most happy returning, and then I'll go filter that out in my code. But anyway, so we have, excuse me a moment, we have, where am I got to? We have our agent here. So that just a prompt describing what it needs to do. It's very simple, get all relations, because again, we're not having this issue of like, or all family members of excluding same generation. We have this data, have this file where we're going to store the results. Then we're using, in this case, we're using async.io queue so that we can like run these. We run 12 of these workers, so we can run it in parallel with 12 of them because it's relatively slow, and we have whatever 650 pages to go through. And then within each worker, we're getting the next task. We are taking the HTML. I'm doing a bit of pruning again, basically to go down to the element that is the like body of the page. So instead of effectively, if we go to this chap, I don't know who he is, but him, it doesn't look, well, anyway, won't make any comments. Instead of giving it the whole HTML for the page, I'm just giving it the HTML from in here to reduce the amount of work it needs to do. And then I'm literally giving it the text of that component of the page and saying, go extract the MPs. Sorry, go extract the relations, because the result type is list of political relation. and it's not perfect, but it seemed to do a pretty good job. A friend of mine who is politically interested went through it, and it's not perfect, but I think most of the imperfections were because Wikipedia doesn't include all of your relations.
Do you have output?
Yeah, so I have output. So this is the result of running the full thing. So you'll see this particular person, Seamus Logan, has no relations. Some of these first ones
that do have relations.
Yeah. So here, for example, Stephen Flynn has a relation. His father, Mark Flynn, who was Dundee City Councillor, and if you go and get to the full results, then 23% of politicians have ancestors. So basically, not their generation. So parents and grandparents, etc., who were politicians. 34% have some kind of political relation, and then if you break it down by party, Conservatives have the most, perhaps not surprisingly, and then Labour Party, who claim to be all, boy done good, working class. Actually, 20% of them have relations who are already politicians. I can run it as well. Obviously, it's, as you would expect, connected to Logfire to collect information on the usage. The other interesting thing I did here was I used Rich's progress bar to show the progress of the output. I would love us to have a way to do progress within Logfire, so you could update a span to basically say how far the progress you are, and therefore show within Logfire how far you are through a process. The reason I had to set console false here, so basically not print anything from Logfire, was otherwise, whenever we had the HTTP requests, which are being, or indeed any output from Logfire, it breaks up the progress bar. So shall I run it? Would that be entertaining?
Sure.
So I'm going to move, because at the moment it's finished, I'm going to move MP relations to MP relations backup, so it actually has something to do. And then I'm going to UV run main, and in theory, off it's going to go. So it hasn't output anything in Logfire because about the Logfire where it's being sent. So I'm just going to log into Logfire here to see how it's going. Which now I don't know what project I connected it to. So let me come back here. This is the problem with having too many projects in Logfire. I'm going to switch that off for now, so it does print out what project it's connecting to. There we are, and you see it's now running. And it was a project confusingly called Foobar by me, which was a bit stupid. But you can see that round I just did now for 16 seconds that failed. That cost me 33 cents. And then here it is running. Some of these are obviously in progress, these runs. And you can see it both downloading. So we're instrumenting HTTPX, and we're obviously instrumenting Pydantic AI as well. So you can see inside here, this was the body of the document that we sent to the LLM, and the output it gave from this one was no relations.
Probably benefit from some more spans.
And actually, we've got to $3 already. So this is actually like it's properly jumping through with the 12 parallelism. And you can see why I turned off the console. If I kill it and run it again with console stops, you'll see it running a bit better. And you'll see it
burning dollars.
This is don't worry, Pydantic's paying. Pydantic's paying. We paid
$5. Wow.
And you'll see it's carrying on now, doing the last few.
And you see how we should format the tokens better when they're like 9 digits or something.
Yeah, I think we didn't. No one tried that. We need some commas in
there. Yeah. Or 1.9 M tokens.
And yeah, and then so that I'll just finish again. It's not so specifically Pydantic AI, but once we've got that, we load that into a Pandas data frame. Polar's data frame, and I couldn't be bothered to work out how to do the data frame stuff, so I just wrote SQL to do the resulting calculations, and then print out the output of running that SQL, which is these two tables here. Oh, and I set it to print out mode in Markdown so that I can copy paste this directly into the README. But yeah, I think the interesting bit here is like this particular case was an excellent use of LLM. This like extracting this kind of data from text. But secondly, that like kind of just give a browser a website isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to do something a bit more nuanced, as in this case, and definitely spurred me to make some more improvements to MCP run Python so that you could have basically given the LLM the beginnings of a page and said, now write me Python code to extract all of the whatever from this page, rather than using an LLM to do all of that chunking through.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good demo for next time.
Yeah, I will.
How to get it to code gen, that sort of thing, where you give it the data. I mean, in general, I feel like there's a lot of good use cases like this of like, I wanted to write some code, but that I want to like, I mean, similar to like, I mean, I wonder if you could do it using Cursor easily, tell it to like go to this website or something, grab the data. And...
I have the beginnings of something I was building, which was basically building the front end for, in this basic, well, I say fast API apps, but basically any app that implements Open API, where it will basically take the JSON schema and like one shot you a UI. And even some of the Grok really fast models will basically 100% reliably write you TypeScript components to generate the UI, to render the UI. So instead of you giving it like all 100 rows and saying, turn this into HTML, you say, here's the format of one row, now write me a React component to render these.
So it's basically Swagger built on the fly.
Yeah.
A better UI version of Swagger.
I call it slow UI.
Slow UI, that's good, yeah.
But then we might not call it slow UI if we actually released it.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, how has your experience been with using Zed?
I am a big fan of Zed. It is not perfect.
I have opinions too,
by any means, but I had we have a Slack now with the Zed guys where I give them like copious feedback on things that frustrate me. But like in general, the performance is in a different league. I would like be very confident that in a year's time it will be a like no-brainer that you would switch from VS Code. And because it's written in Rust and it is just fundamentally more performant, it's not like VS Code can go and like add a feature. I'm really bullish on Zed. I think it's awesome.
Can you? But it's like, it's not VS Code kind of looking, no?
It looks a bit like VS Code, but it's the guys who built Atom. Do you remember the GitHub? As I understand it, I apologize if this is a wrong understanding, but like it's the guys who built Atom. Atom was then obviously the inspiration behind VS Code. And then eventually Microsoft, who ultimately owned GitHub, abandoned or like closed down Atom as a project. Those guys then went and built Zed. So this is, all implemented in Rust, as I understand it. But I'm on the preview and they have a nice cursor-esque functionality here, which is obviously using the same models under the hood. So I don't know if anyone could think of a good example of something I should change in this code, and I can try and get it agentically to do that.
I don't
convert the SQL into proper API calls.
That's a good idea. Now I don't know how to. I want a new.
I'll be impressed if it works, but that does feel like a reasonable thing to ask it to do.
How do I open a new? I've like somehow
Command Shift I.
You're not doing the best job selling this thing.
At the moment, I'm not doing it. I
don't even know how to use it.
There is a plus on the top of your screen, on the top right.
Yeah. That's what I want. Yeah. And
is this Zeta model any good? What's that?
I think I'm using Claude 3.7 is the model it's connecting to.
Yeah, I mean, the question is really like, what's it doing under the hood when it says this? And I think that like I've never really dug into what Cursor does or what the IDE, Windsurf, etc. I imagine they have some special sauce in their prompts and stuff so you're gonna get, just because it says Claude 3.7 doesn't mean you're gonna get the same results. Obviously,
Well, it's
It's
not
not
doing a
gonna
great job now of working
do
out what
that
SQL I
different.
mean. So it's,
No,
it's
it's
having a
because
bit of a fail.
it's because you are on the mode ask instead of agent on your
Yeah, right.
I'm not doing a very good job of driving it. I apologize. Let me try that again and see if it works any better this time.
While we're waiting for this, I'll just note, I mean, my reaction, I am like a much heavier user of IDE integrations than Samuel. Like I like a lot of the refactoring tool and things like that. And I find that PyCharm is still the winner on that. PyCharm absolutely sucks these days at type semantics and inference and stuff, which
it's not
but I
only
just,
sorry, it's
I'm
not
so
only
fast.
nowadays.
Well, it's gotten worse over time, but it's gotten really bad lately. I'm so fast at moving around code bases with it due to all the muscle memory and everything. But like there are a lot of functionality that I think still just like doesn't exist. I mean, it's understandable. PyCharm's JetBrains stuff's been under development for decades now, but like there's still a lot that. But if you just want a basic text editor that's fast and you're kind of happy for it to get out of your way, I think Zed is there. I
Wait,
mean,
but
they
it,
would.
it
I'm sure they would argue they've gone further, but
it doesn't change your code. You need to copy paste.
No, it should update it, but I don't know what I'm doing wrong that it's
Then
not.
click on the right where it says right on the bottom, on the left. This profile. I
The
don't
other
know.
day it was writing it happily, so I don't know whether I've done something to
I
switch
mean,
it
this
off.
is sort of like demo-esque. I mean, you don't have cursor handy, do you, Samuel?
I
I'd
don't.
be
I
interested to see
don't
what
know.
happens if you
So
try cursor with the same
does
prompt.
but does this Zed has like the tab functionality that cursor has
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
just
it does.
press
It
tab
does,
all
yeah.
the time?
It's meant to work that way. I think. I mean, this is under pretty active development by them, so
So it's
not
also
too
I'm on
surprising.
preview, and this panel here is completely in preview. So I may have done.
So,
it may not be working.
so it's not ready for prime time, but like
I mean, I'm using it to over PyCharm because I just got so frustrated with some of the. So I think a bit of context. PyCharm obviously predates typing in Python, and they had a very powerful, the most powerful at the time, language server that tried to work out what type something was to do auto. It had lots of specific stuff for things like Django, and pandas and NumPy and stuff like that. Obviously, what's happened is that typing has become the default way of working out what type something is, and Pyrite right now is the leading effectively language server, and the PyCharm have continued to push on with their thing, which they've kind of adapted to use types, and that, in my opinion, isn't performing as well as like Pyrite.
It's just not keeping up with the language semantics. Like as they're like it's slow for them to implement new features. You know, obviously the geopolitical thing, kind of with Ukraine and Russia, was tough for them.
Yeah.
But as a result, like
I'll use it as an example of why you should build on standards and build in the open. Either build in the open or build on standards, because in the end, basically open standards ended up beating their good development work. So if you look at our competitors and those who've made the extraordinary decision not to build on open telemetry, like they're going to be in trouble in 5 years' time when they're still trying to keep up with open telemetry where everyone else is working. Because you have Datadog and Cisco and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and most importantly of all Pydantic working on open telemetry, and you have LangChain working on their own proprietary format. Which one's going to win? I don't think it's that hard to work out.
Yeah, I mean, right. I think we'll just see more standardization
David,
over time.
Anything more? Go on.
David, do we have any built-in tools for working with OpenAPI and REST APIs as part of PydanticAI?
I was gonna ask if anybody has seen stuff. Like, I feel like somebody's got a OpenAPI MCP server, right? Like, there's got to be.
Yeah, there is.
That it's kind of absurd. I mean, for all the stuff people are using MCP for today, namely just tools and nothing else, Samuel. It's kind of absurd that it didn't start with open. My pet hypothesis is that what happened here is that no one, like MCP, people were incentivized for MCP to succeed because of commercial interests. Nobody has a commercial interest in OpenAPI, and so even though OpenAPI was perfectly adequate as a starting point for a lot of this stuff, like, you know, all these IDEs could have just allowed you to add an OpenAPI spec and just started making requests to it. And nobody built the standard for it and was like paying people to push it or whatever. I mean, this is a little bit paranoid of me to assume that it was being paid to be pushed, but the point is, maybe that wasn't the case, but I think that obviously economic interests align. The point is,
I'm just posting a
feel
link
like-
to an OpenAI MCP server into the conversation. I haven't used it, so I'm not giving any. I don't know how good it is, but
in principle, right. The obvious thing to do is to use an MCP server that just wraps OpenAPI. And frankly, TypeScript is like almost certainly better for this sort of thing than Python in general, like generating like API. I mean, it's just JavaScript is really good with these sorts of like, you know, API spec things. And my feeling is that, so the point is this MCP, I assume this is like an NPX MCP server. Yeah. So the point is then you just give it the spec and it will do the tool calling, et cetera. And it's going to presumably pass that stuff through. So like you could use it from Python. It's just a normal MCP server. So it just handles all that translation for you. That would be what I would recommend it's what I would recommend experimenting with. If you have issues with it, let us know. I'm keen to support OpenAPI specs as MCP or as tools.
Marcelo?
No, I don't have anything.
I will just add. I'm sure David DSP, the creator of MCP, would who I've met and I am a big fan of. I think is a bright guy. Will have a very good answer as to why it can't just be that. Now, what I think even he is frustrated that most people are just using tools, which I agree. Tools can be defined via an MCP.
To be clear, MCP can do a lot more than just tools. My point is that there are tons of people who like you can make so much progress with just tools that it's like, why isn't this better supported? I'm not saying there aren't motivations to do more, like, and I can see why MCP does more, but it just feels like it's overkill for most of what it's being used for today.
Any questions we're missing, Marcelo?
No. There was one on the top that I missed. So, any updates to parallel node execution in graphs?
Update in the form of commercial update. More and more people who might be customers are clamoring for it, so it's definitely going to happen.
I've done some work on it actually. I have like a more technical answer to that question. But say what you're finishing.
That was all I was going to say, and nothing else. But I'm wrong. Turns out there is.
I did. So basically, I played with it. My concern is that we might need to change some of the graph APIs for this. But basically, I was talking, and I don't who asked this question, Marcel. I'm wondering if it's the same person.
No.
I think it's.
Hold on. It's Kachi Chas.
Yeah. Okay. So I was talking with another user.
But Hansa put a +1 here.
Yeah. Okay. So the point is, like lang graph, the way you can add. My understanding, and I've talked to a few people. I haven't built stuff with lang graph doing like interesting like fan out and fan in stuff. The point is, it makes it pretty convenient to essentially like, so you write your functions that are nodes, like essentially nodes, right? Or in lang graph terminology, nodes are just functions that like make some modification to state, and then edges are things that decide what to do next. In our graphs, you, as part of running the node, you decide what happens next. Okay, which means that edges are like kind of it's not easy to add edges after the fact. And what I think we need to do is modify our implementation so that, or not modify our implementation. It's like, I want to introduce some convenience APIs for building a graph out of functions plus transitions. Like, I played around with the idea of having sort of like a base class that was more conducive to this approach, where you can define a node that's going to modify state, or like, you basically create a new node by giving it a function that will modify state along with a function that will determine which edge to transition to. And that allows you to reuse that state modification to make it a little, essentially you can define your transitions in the same way that in LangGraph, you put all your transition or all your edges in one place instead of sprinkling your edge definitions into each of your nodes like we require you to do. The point is like that's work. Now, to be clear, I think that if you're not trying to do interesting like dynamic edge traversal, it's better to put the edge transition into the node. Like, it's what happens next is localized. But there are a lot of people who I think for, whether it's because it's what they're used to or for other reasons, kind of want to put the node definitions in one place or the edge definitions in one place. And I want to support that.
I'm less convinced by, but anyway.
Well, to be clear, if you have a bunch of functions that just make modifications to the node, it's reasonable to allow you to like plug them into each other in different ways. Like I don't necessarily want to force you to
Yeah,
like
true.
rework the way you think about your application. However, and I think we can using like a convenience API. In terms of the fan out stuff, though, I think the point is basically all we need to do is set it up so that you can create like there needs to be a special node type that will allow you to where essentially you give it the set of functions you want to call or nodes you want to call or whatever and a reducer. I mean, this is kind of similar to what happens in LangGraph. The point is you have a reducer function that is able to combine the results, and then there's a question of what you want to do with history. Like essentially, if you've got a bunch of nodes that you're executing, how do we store history? One option is to store it as a tree. Another option is to just not worry about the ordering of node executions in the history. Or another is to have essentially just one. I mean, I say a tree. Like the point is that's one node for the root. The question is whether I allow extra detail inside of that nodes. I think there's like a bunch of open questions here. People who are interested in parallel node execution, please, the more detail you can give us about your use case and what you need out of what you care about. Like if all you care about is execution, you don't care about history or persistence or anything, that's useful for us to know. Any additional information you can give about like how you define, especially if you have an implementation of this today using a different, like let's say LangGraph or anything else, or if you're just handwriting like a task group and you're like, this kind of sucks for these reasons, like explaining why you don't like what you have to do today is really helpful for us in designing a solution. So like, please, and the more detailed, the better. Feel free to email us or create a GitHub issue or whatever. I'm very, would be happy to set up a call just to like talk it through. If you send us an email, because it's something that's like hard to sort of get right in the abstract. And I would like to see more examples of like concrete usage or concrete applications that would benefit from it.
Persistence bigger than parallel for most cases, Hansa said.
As in matters more. Okay. I mean, we need to also we did the work on persistence. It exists. I know some people are using it, but like we definitely need to like give more examples and give it some more love.
I mean, and persistence, like the thing about persistence versus parallel, it's like, what does it mean if I pause a graph execution, right, and want to resume it later? Like, I mean, if I want to make use of persistence, what should I do if I'm like partway through some sort of like parallel execution? Do I like, resume all the tasks that
you have to abandon results? I mean,
you don't have to conceptually. I mean, with our current implementation, maybe. But I think that's the question: is what should happen? Like, should we be storing state as some sort of tree where you can resume it from like partial progress in all the different like sort of branches, or DAG? I mean, it's more a DAG than a tree, but it's not even a DAG; it's just a DG, directed graph. But anyway,
go on, Marcel.
So the example that you showed before, the MP relations example, would you be able to pull via Git?
Yes.
Where's the code? Is it public?
It is, and I am putting it now into the thing. What I forgot, which is the kind of the final bit of this, is that like this week, the rest is politics. Not only did they talk about what I had done, but they also mentioned that Samuel Colvin had used Pydantic AI to analyze it, and then got into a fight about. Then Rory Stewart, who is in many ways my idol, although annoyed me on this, got confused between 66% and 66 times, which made me a little bit sad. So but anyway, it did come up. So it'll out tomorrow. If you want to listen to the rest is politics question time, which I think comes out tomorrow, you will hear about Pydantic AI for the first and only time, I'm pretty sure.
You need to just keep contributing analyses to them and become like a technical correspondent.
I'll do my best, but I'll. Do you want me to play the bit? I don't know if I can find it quickly. Maybe that's too boring, but anyway.
I think that's a little boring.
We have 5 minutes. Something else that we're missing on our agenda?
I don't know that there's anything. I mean,
if there's any topics that people want us, like, I think, we're going to keep doing these. We talked about MCP, A2A agency. I think there was some interest in that. If you have requests for topics you want us to sort of dig into and give thoughts on, maybe like incorporate into Pydantic AI, like things you care about, memory, like, other sorts of like design, tooling, things that are relevant to AI development, like definitely let us know. And we will incorporate that into future episodes, future, chats.
Code agents.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, Samuel, I think we could do a code agents. I mean, I think we kind of talked about that on the first one, but I feel like we could have an actual, the stuff has evolved quite a bit, and we could have a little bit better demo.
Yeah. So we talked about sampling earlier and code agents, and I think that brings me on to something else related. I spoke to DSP, to David Pereira, the MCP guy, last week. Basically what I'm planning to do. I don't think he really approves, but I'm doing it anyway. We're going to misuse sampling for calling back to the host, because obviously one thing you want to be able to do is basically pass a bunch of functions that the code you're executing can call, but you don't want to pass through for like all of the data or necessarily like secrets or anything sensitive. So we need a way to basically be able to call back to the host to execute code, and I'm going to basically misuse sampling for that. So again, that will be a kind of misuse of some bits of MCP, but that will only work with Pydantic AI as the client, at least initially.
There's a user that we care about a lot, Samuel, that actually requested a very similar thing, basically binding. He wanted to bind function, properties that are MCP tools. So like the point is, like, it's like you have an MCP tool that accepts like a tenant ID.
Yeah,
I want to be able to pass the tenant ID in if the LLM tries to make use of that tool. It's like related. It's not exactly the same, but I think that it's something that's missing in MCP that,
I mean,
it's sort of worth thinking about.
I mean, the problems always come when you build powerful enough concepts. People go and do things you hadn't expected, and like I don't think necessarily that they thought we were gonna go and build this thing for like running code, basically this code execution environment using MCP. And so, of course, they haven't thought about that. I think they're relatively open to modifications. So, yeah, I don't know whether or not they will consider basically a way of registering a bunch of tools with the server that the server can call whilst calling the client's stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I have more questions. Well, can you please share email channel where we can reach out?
Yeah, just email engineering@pydantic.dev or join Slack and email us there.
Yeah, if you go to our website, like, you should not have a hard time finding the Slack link. Yeah, and then the Pydantic AI channel is great. You can DM Samuel. He responds to every DM.
Or email David at pydantic.dev.
But yeah, I mean,
Pydantic.dev.
I mean, seriously though, please don't DM or email individuals, because you're much less likely to get a response than if you put it in the like engineering@pydantic.dev or.
I don't mind if you DM me, but it is true. You'll get a response in the channel. You're probably not get a response if you DM Samuel, because he has about 100 of those that he also hasn't looked at.
So I have more. Mostly, I would like to see how you see Pydantic AI fitting in the ecosystem, such as A2A, MCP, etc. Okay.
Look, I think there's a space for like. I still don't think that there is other than Pydantic AI, there is a production grade agent framework. I know that is, I'm biased, but I have looked at the other ones, and if you look at metrics, which are not by any means like absolutely guarantee quality, and the absence of those metrics doesn't guarantee poor quality, but like if you look at, are those libraries unit testing against all supported versions of Python? Are they reporting coverage? How many unit tests are there? Are they using type checking? Are they even using linting? You will discover, if you go through your favorite agent framework, that it almost certainly isn't doing those things, let alone the next step up of like, let's go and unit test all of our examples so we know they don't go out of date. Let's do live tests against actual models. These are the kinds of things that I don't think anyone else is doing. So it's a agent framework that puts engineering quality above like implementing the latest like hype cycle.
I'll also note, I mean, my vision is like it's kind of an orthogonal answer. I mean, OpenAI has their agents SDK. Google released their agents SDK. I think that we're going to see vendors are. I don't know what's going to happen with Anthropic, et cetera, but I think vendors are going to be motivated to offer something out of the box so that if you basically just want to use them, you don't have to add another dependency, or if you don't trust or whatever. I think our vision is to be like the agent SDK for cross vendor usage. I mean, obviously, I think we can go. I personally believe we could do a better job than the vendors while still being cross vendor. But there's always going to be some tension there. That's fine. If you want the ability to flip a switch and switch between Google and Anthropic and OpenAI, like I think my personal opinion is that we should be the best option for building a tool that can do that.
I think the other way to put it is I was at AI Engineer in New York back in February talking to people about agent frameworks, and honest truth, not everyone was a fan of them. A lot of people wanted to basically get out of my way and let me make direct API calls to the models. But the one thing everyone agreed that they wanted, the one thing everyone agrees is useful from agent frameworks is model agnosticism, being able to go and switch model and try different models. And so I find my guess is that these agent frameworks, which are tied to one particular vendor, are going to be seen as the worst of both worlds for the like biggest use cases where people want minimal, they want to be as close to the road as they possibly can be. They want a stick shift, to use an Americanism, and they want complete control, but they want to be able to switch model easily, and that's where we fit in. Although, of course, we're going to go and do a bunch of augmenting on top to make it easy to do things like reflection and like registering tools easily, whatever.
I think this stuff is evolving quickly. Like the point, I know we're over.
Yep.
Let me just finish. The stuff is evolving quickly. I think the point is, it's hard to keep up as like an end user if you're just using like the chat API directly. And I think that was, viable for a period of time. It's still viable if you're building simpler applications, but I think our goal is to like make it a very light abstraction layer over that, if that's what you want, while still being able to integrate with more advanced stuff like, iterative tool calling and MCP servers and other things like that.
I have 3 more messages and then we can end the live.
Okay.
So I'd be interested in seeing more about how PydanticAI can be used with RAG, since that is very popular use case for other frameworks like Llama Index and LangChain. This is one.
Yeah.
Want to comment or are we good?
Yes, we can. We can add some more like examples, but all of the fundamentals are there. There was a lot of people who confuse RAG with vector search and embeddings.
I think we could do a better job of supporting like integrated embeddings workflows, but yeah, it is possible to do this today if you get your hands dirty.
Right. Love the PydanticAI framework. Use it all over all others now. Smile face.
Thank you very much, Adam.
And the last one, would be cool to see your dev env setup IDE terminal tools.
I mean,
talk
mine
about
is
that next time.
The bog average Apple like Mac terminal and Z, as you saw earlier. But we can show you David's. We can't show you Marcelo's because he's.
We can talk. I think that's like an interesting topic for like 5-10 minutes of conversation next time.
Yep.
Anyway, so thank you very much, everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Right.
How do I close the live now? That's a good question.
Oh, David's left. I'm still here.
Hold on, I didn't end it. Oh, yeah. See you, folks. Is it over?